While traveling W/friends, I was playfully mocking him that he's my side piece until he did this. I never thought I'd actually ask for relationship advice on Reddit. I have talked to my friends, family, and therapist, but I still feel the need for different opinions. What better than thousands of opinions from strangers? As you can see, it's really bad. I'll tell my story using fictional names for privacy and for everyone to understand clearly. My name is Alice, I am 25 years old and have been in a relationship for 2 years now. My boyfriend Luke is also 25. I'm absolutely crazy about him. Never thought I'd find the perfect boyfriend until we started dating. He is incredibly sweet, treats me like a goddess he adores, remembers the smallest references of our relationship and gives me gifts related to them. And sometimes my family loves him more than they love me. Conclusion: he is amazing. I'll love him forever, seriously. We didn't have much of a perfect or easy start. The beginning of our relationship was a complete mess. Luke used to be best friends with my ex-boyfriend. I know, lame, right? Even worse, I cheated on my ex with Luke, and that's why we're together. Before you judge, I'll explain the complicated history of my past relationship. I was 20 when I started dating my ex-boyfriend Eric. He was also my age. I met him and Luke at college. We were all under different degrees, but went to the same campus, so we'd always see each other around. We went to the same parties, they started being friends with my friends. Eric and I became closer and closer until we kissed at a campus party, and he asked me out on a date. For the next 3 years, part of my life was dedicated to Eric. I never thought of myself as the kind of girl who puts her boyfriend as the biggest priority in life. At the time, I fought against that feeling a lot. I reminded myself that with Eric or no Eric, I needed to achieve my academic and professional goals, because they are my actual priority. The problem was that our relationship was very high maintenance. If I didn't give him enough attention or distance myself to study for my tests, he would feel hurt and neglected. I caught myself many times thinking and wondering about how he was feeling. Not just regular boyfriend thoughts. He was in my mind so often it was annoying and distracting. I loved him, but it was overwhelming to be with him. I don't like to think or talk much about my relationship with Eric. It wasn't a very healthy one, and he's kind of a sensitive topic between me and Luke. Me and Eric both struggled with mental health issues. We understood and supported each other, but with time, without noticing, we got so lost and involved in them that we just lived in a depressive rabbit hole together. When the academic stress was too much, Eric developed the habit of drinking, a lot, to forget about his problems. It got worse during the 3rd year of our relationship. That's when Luke started being more present in the situation. They lived in their college dorm with 2 other boys. That year, Luke moved out to live with his girlfriend off campus, but she ended up breaking up with him and paying the rent for the rest of the year, because she felt guilty. He still lived there, but was always around his old dorm since no student was assigned to his room. I asked for his help very often, usually when Eric was throwing up drunk and locked in the bathroom. He definitely handled it better than me. Seeing him genuinely care about Eric made me feel less stressed about the situation. These episodes weren't so usual, but every time they happened, a part of me would love Eric a little bit less. I had to listen to him say the worst things about me and pretend they never happened, because he wouldn't remember them the next day. One night I was supposed to meet my boyfriend at their dorm because we were going to the movies together. Eric said he'd be home by 6:30, which was when his class ended. That way we could watch the 7 p.m. movie session. I showed up at 6 o'clock and found Luke watching TV by himself in the living room. We talked and watched his favorite TV show while I waited for Eric. I waited for an hour and a half and he still hadn't shown up. Luke stared at me with a merciful look on his face every now and then. He felt sorry for me. It wasn't hard to tell. "Do you think he is okay? Should I go after him?" I asked Luke around 8. Luke said he probably got caught up with his teacher and just forgot to tell me. I knew immediately he was just trying to make me feel better while I got stood up and made the 15th call to my boyfriend. I kept thinking he could have been robbed or something, but Luke reminded him we were inside the campus. Even if he tried really hard, nothing dangerous would happen to him. I stayed only to yell at him. I went over and over our soon-to-happen fight in my head. I mentally organized everything I had to say to that jerk when he finally showed up. It was past 9 when he opened the front door. I didn't think I remembered so many details, but I guess it is easy to remember the reasons why I was angry. Having to wait 3 hours without a single text made me pretty pissed. I was eating the ice cream Luke offered me for pity when I saw Eric walk in. I left the bowl on the center table and got up ready to yell at him. When he stumbled his way in with his eyes barely open and slurred speech, I wanted to pick up the ice cream bowl and smash it in his head. "You are drunk?" I asked with the most angry voice tone I could pull. He started to excuse himself. I yelled and cursed at him. He tried to apologize, but when I made him angry, he just threw back at me not very understandable, but angry words. Luke was just sitting on the couch staring at us completely silent and shocked. He didn't want to get involved, but also didn't have the nerve to move a muscle away from there. I couldn't stop anxiously yelling at Eric to a point he started walking towards his bedroom, pretending to ignore me. When I pulled his arm to get his attention again, I just felt a huge knockout in my face after he screamed, "You are such a bitch." He punched me right in the nose. I felt my blood pressure drop immediately. My vision started to go black, and I heard Luke yell words I couldn't understand. It felt like my head was underwater, and I could barely hear the muffled sound of their voices. My nose was bleeding a lot. When I raised my head, I saw Luke holding Eric's arms and body, stopping him from getting to me. Luke looked at me, checking if I was okay. When I looked back at him, he told me to wait in the stairs outside. I didn't even question him and just ran out of the apartment while I heard Eric calling my name, crying. I sat on the dorm stairs and couldn't hold back the tears, feeling them weirdly blend with my nosebleed. Until today, I believe this moment represents the worst heartbreak I ever had. I was with Eric for 3 years, and seeing him raise his hand at me as if it was nothing made me question part of my feelings for him, while I was sure the other part had just died right at that moment. Luke came back trying to hide the small tears on his face after he made sure I was okay. I wasn't, but I was alive and conscious. He said, "Let's get out of here and take care of your nose." I locked Eric in his room and called our roommate to come and check on him. Luke took me to his apartment. I felt calmer being off campus. I really didn't want to be in a place he could find me. When we got to Luke's apartment, he cleaned and took care of my nose, gave me a clean shirt, which wasn't stained with blood, and made me a cup of tea. He seemed hesitant to talk about what just happened with me. He kept repeating, "It's okay now." I was quiet, trying to process everything, trying and failing not to relive the last 30 minutes. Luke told me to sleep in his bed. He offered to sleep on the couch, and I didn't argue. I started randomly crying while he was showing me where the extra blankets were. Luke sat by my side without saying a word and just hugged me. I cried for a very long time on his shoulder, but he didn't seem to mind. He asked if I wanted to watch a movie to get distracted, and I accepted it. Definitely wouldn't have been able to sleep with the mess which was going on in my mind. I woke up the next morning on the couch with Luke's arm around me while I laid my head on his shoulder. We accidentally slept watching TV, but I felt safe and comfortable with his contact, so I didn't complain. I guess Luke wasn't feeling weird about the situation. He saw me more as a broken thing he needed to take care of than a girl he could actually get. It was good. I really needed a friend at that moment. So much I even spent the weekend at his apartment, even with Eric begging me to let him in and talk. At least Luke said I could stay as much as I wanted, and what I wanted the most was to be away from Eric. That Sunday was my last night at Luke. We ordered pizza and talked about the thousands of calls, texts, and everything else Eric did as a way to try to apologize to me. I didn't want to talk to him. Luke also thought it was a good idea not to. We spent all night talking. I was so used to his physical touch it became natural in those couple of days. So we hugged a lot. We were cleaning up the kitchen when Luke said he thought Eric didn't deserve me, and that he could never treat a woman the way Eric treated me. He looked at me deeply while saying that, so I gave myself to the intrusive thought of kissing Luke and felt butterflies when he kissed me back. We slept together that day. We also didn't talk about it. At all. The situation was complicated. We both wanted to do it, but neither of us wanted to discuss how much we were affecting someone we both loved, who had serious alcoholic problems. Speaking of Eric, his friends called his parents, who decided to check him into rehab. His mom called asking me to go with them on Monday. She said she understood what he had done to me and she didn't expect me to forgive him. She wanted me to be there in the beginning of his recovery, to offer support in the place of causing a crisis when breaking up with him. I didn't want to make things worse, so not very willingly I got into a car with my boyfriend and his family. Luke asked me if I wanted him to be there, but that would have just made the 2 hours drive even more awkward. Our school was in a small city, so there weren't many nearby clinics pleasing enough to his parents. Eric tried to talk to me during the entire ride, but I just kept answering, "I am not talking about this in front of your parents." I was definitely breaking up with Eric. I just needed to wait for things to be stable in his life. While that happened, I just went to visit days to catch things up and play cards with him. Me and Luke kept on seeing each other. Eric was in rehab. I couldn't break up with him, or else he would run away from the clinic and show up drunk at my door, and I also resented him for what he did to me. I tried to look at the bigger picture, but I always told myself violence in a relationship is unacceptable, and I wasn't going to forgive Eric for what he did. I didn't exactly feel guilty about it, Luke did, but as our feelings for each other got deeper, he let himself get involved. I was starting to have strong feelings for Luke because my feelings for Eric died a few months before when he decided to start making the worst decisions of his life. It was natural, easy, romantic, and light. Even my grades got better. When Eric was in my daily life, I lost a lot of time making him feel good. Now I could study and date someone who distracted me from my problems and wasn't the actual problem. I broke up with Eric a month and a half after he got into rehab. He was still there but doing a lot better. He was upset but had accepted our breakup was inevitable. I also told him I was with Luke. It made things a little worse, but I couldn't lie to him. In the end, his reaction was better than I expected, and in that moment, my story with Eric ended. 2 years later, I look back and don't regret anything I did. Luke is the best thing that ever happened to me. Our relationship is amazing, but we are going through a hard phase. After a trip we took with some friends, things have been weird. Luke seems to be with something related to our past on his mind. We have argued a few times, and I'm very worried. One of our best friends planned a birthday trip to a beach in San Diego. We spent the weekend there, and in one of our late-night conversations with the group we were talking about relationships, experiences, heartbreak, cheating, etc. We were used to doing this in every occasion. Everyone there were couples, but we didn't have a problem talking about our past dating experiences. One of the girls said she once cheated her high school boyfriend with her older brother's friend. We were laughing about her story because she ended up falling for the guy she cheated with and got dumped by both of them. I then joked saying Luke was my side piece that had worked out, but his reaction wasn't good. While everyone was laughing, he stared at me annoyed. No one noticed and he didn't say anything, but when we got to our room, we started arguing, trying to keep it low so that no one could hear us. He said he didn't feel comfortable bringing up what happened with Eric into a conversation. All of our friends were in our lives when it happened. They went to college with us. They knew Eric. We were already very close, and they all supported our decision of me and Luke being together, and none of them are close to Eric. It didn't seem like a problem to talk about it with them because it isn't a big deal in our lives today. But Luke gets a little triggered when someone mentions Eric. I had made jokes like that before, and he didn't seem to mind. But that day, something was more intense than usual. Luke said it's impossible to control the weight on his conscience when someone mentions Eric. He was like a ghost in his life. It seemed to him that I forgot and moved on completely while he was stuck in the morals of his head. He was also really angry with the term side piece I used talking about him. He doesn't want the beginning of our relationship to seem like an affair, which kind of was. That's probably why it bothers him so much. I guess he felt that way other times I mentioned Eric, but knowing Luke, he probably didn't say anything because he wants me to feel safe to talk about past traumas, especially since we were both there in this one. Either way, it's a tough subject for him, I knew that, but didn't think it was something he got extremely anxious over. I apologized and said I wouldn't talk about it anymore. I had no reason to. He said it was fine, but he was still a little weird the next day, which was when we came home from the trip. On the road, a couple of friends came in our car, but in 1 hour they were dead asleep in the back seat, leaving me and Luke to the awkward silence and a song we could barely hear because of the low volume. I felt he was looking at me. I just kept looking forward and watching the road. I think I want to sit down and talk to Eric. When I heard him say it, I internally screamed, wondering why the subject wasn't over yet. I asked where this feeling was coming from and why. He just answered that he needed closure because he hasn't talked to Eric since the day he had a physical fight with drunk Eric to lock him in his room. He didn't want to make amends. He still wanted to keep Eric as a ghost from his past, but they apparently still had unfinished business. It's your decision. I'll support you either way. Just won't talk to him. I finished the conversation and Luke said he'd think about it better. Last Wednesday, 3 days after we got home from the trip with my boyfriend still acting cold and weird, I was at work and got a text message from Luke in the afternoon. Here's what he said. Hey beautiful, how's your day going? I couldn't get my mind out of what we talked about at Sam's trip. After these few days, my mind seemed more organized and I'm not that freaked out about it anymore. I'm sorry for being a jerk about this there and making you feel bad. I forgot to tell you that in that morning Alan asked me about Eric, because he bumped into him in an event at our old college. He asked if I ever talked to him again. That just brought the whole thing back to my mind and ruined my day. I took it out on you, I'm sorry, and hope you can forgive me. You know how I feel about Eric. I don't want to know how he's doing or pretend what he did to you was fine. I'm not fine, and you shouldn't either. I have no interest in his life, but I can't keep feeling like shit every time I think about him. So I decided to contact him. I haven't yet, but I intend to. In respect for you, I won't talk about it if you don't want me to. I know you handle this a lot better than me, but you probably don't want to unnecessarily relive this, so just let me know. You went through a lot with him. I don't want to keep dumping this on you. I love you, okay? A lot. I'm making it up to it. Let's go to dinner tonight. Tell me what time you'll be home, please. Bye, my love. I texted him saying it was all fine, but I couldn't help worrying about this reunion. I know deep down in me that Luke will get somehow even more affected seeing Eric. It isn't a good idea in my opinion, and I will stay tense until Sunday, which is when they are going for coffee. Luke got his number with some guy from our old college. They talked and decided to meet. What are your opinions? Should I be worried? Should I go with him? I'm scared. Luke has been strange for days, and my insecure self keeps thinking he'll break up with me. But because of guilt? I can't think straight about this anymore. Maybe he's acting like this because of the tension with seeing Eric, I don't know. He's distant, and I hope it doesn't get worse when he comes back from that date with Eric. I'll update as soon as I can. Update. Hey Reddit, I'm back with updates about my messy situation. Last time I checked in, my boyfriend Luke was meeting my ex-boyfriend Eric, who used to be his best friend. I told Luke I was fine with him meeting Eric only if I could pick him up after, so I told him to go without his car. I got there half an hour before Luke asked me to because I was dying waiting for time to pass, and I wanted to see how the conversation was going. I parked in front of the coffee shop, which had glass walls, so I could see them sitting together and talking peacefully. Eric seemed fine. He looked good and normal. I kept watching them talk. They sometimes laughed. It felt like I returned 3 years in the past. Seeing them talk as if they were still roommates gave me chills. A lot of you said Luke just wants to unload his conscience, which is actually true. I just don't trust Eric and don't want to think about the possibility of them becoming friends again. I got comments asking if we heard anything about Eric. Not really. People weren't used to talking about him with us. Most of our friends aren't even close to him. I texted Luke in the exact hour he told me to get there. I saw him pick up the phone and text me back. I'll be out in a second. Do you want anything? I answered him saying I just wanted him out of there, and he laughed. For a second, I thought of walking to the front of the coffee shop and talking to them. I have no control of my impulses, so I waited for them to get to the door and rushed out of the car. Luke stared at me as if I was crazy. Eric was with his back turned to me, but when he saw Luke's eye wander behind him, Eric turned and looked at me like he had seen a ghost. Hearing Eric say my name was like a punch in my stomach. I immediately regretted leaving the car. I said hello and asked how the talk was. They both agreed on the fine. They seemed fine. Eric started asking about my life and how I was doing. I just felt like I wanted to throw up, but instead I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. Just wanted to say hello because it has been a long time since we've seen each other. Can we go, Luke? I looked desperate at my boyfriend, and he let out a quiet laugh. I'm sorry, it's uncomfortable, I know. It's nice seeing you guys. Eric said, smiling. I kind of just wanted to punch him, but whatever. Luke and I said goodbye, but before we could leave, Eric started talking again. I'm sorry for everything, Alice. You didn't deserve anything of what I put you through. I hope you guys always stay happy. He expected some kind of answer, but Luke and I just stared at each other with blank looks on our faces. Then he simply smiled and walked away. You were very brave for doing this, Luke told me on the way to the car. I asked if he got the answers and closure he needed because I didn't want to go through that again. He laughed and said I didn't have to worry about that anymore. What could have they talked about? Luke didn't give me much hint, but he led me to understand he never reached out to Eric because if Luke had to see him, he'd fight him again, except harder for what he did to me. During the years when he thought about Eric, he just thought about fighting him and somehow making him pay for all the pain he caused in our lives. But he felt tired of those angry feelings coming and going back around. That was his way of dealing with them. It has been 2 days since they talked, and things have apparently come back to normal. A part of me will keep wondering if Eric will contact him back, and if Luke will answer. But I'll keep the paranoid thoughts to myself because I don't want to hear that name ever again.